This offseason, many questions are being asked about the New Orleans Saints 2025 offense, including, and asked here, who's going to be the starting quarterback? What's the offensive line going to look like? But there's been very few questions about the tight end group. And with Kellen Moore expected to use quite a bit of 12 personnel this season, I think we need to ask, what are the expectations of the Saints tight end group? Let's try to find some answers. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. To make sure we're all on the same page, I'm back up and we'll talk the very basics of 12 personnel groupings. So when we're talking about personnel groupings, that number 12, 21, 11, whatever it is, the very first number is the number of running backs. Very second number is the number of tight ends. Subtract that out, what you left over is the number of wide receivers. So in 12 personnel, you basically pulled the running back off the field, fullback. You didn't add a receiver, you added a tight end. And this is kind of an offshoot way back in dark ages when I was in high school playing football. Almost everything was run out of an I formation or some variation of an I formation, which led to defenses very basically. Easiest one to describe is a traditional 4-3 where you had three linebackers, right? Willie, Mike, Sam. We middle strong, almost always that strong linebacker. He was lining up where the tight end was, and he was butting heads with him in the running game, trying to cover him in the passing game. Even in 3-4s, they also had their version of that. A lot of times, think Baltimore, stud Ray Lewis. There was always a middle linebacker next to him. A lot of times he had the dirty job of going trying to deal with the tight end. It was definitely not a glamorous position. As offenses finally started getting smart and evolving, it's that fullback more and more started coming off the field in situations with a second tight end out there, forcing the defense to basically go, well, now we have to dedicate a second person or change coverage or do something to adjust for the fact there's now two tight ends out there. By lining them up in the basic 2-by-2, and we'll kind of get into what that means a little later, but 2-by-2, tight end receiver to the one side, tight end receiver to the other side. Typically, the tight ends in line, lined up tight on the tackle. Two of those four are going to be on the line, two of them off the line by NFL rule or football rule in general. But what did that allow the defense was to be very balanced. And the more balanced and the more you kind of prevented defenses from getting exotic, getting special, balanced formations, extra tight ends. Some of that took away what defenses were doing at the time. It's made it harder on them. And so they were having to deal with this. And that tradition is kind of carried forward because if you can work a good 12 personnel grouping into your offense with the personnel able to do it, and that kind of starts with having at least two pretty good tight ends, you could stay very balanced. It do everything in the running game out of 12 that you can do in 21. Any blocking scheme you want to do it with, because both lend themselves to being able to go gap, inside zone, wide zone, split zone, combo, you name it, you can construct your offense around it with the added benefit of having two guys that can block in the running game, help block in the passing game if necessary, chip in the passing game. We saw an awful lot of Kubiak using that last year with our tight ends, where they chip an edge rusher and pass them off to the tackle, then get out as a check down or intermediate or short route. The more you can do stuff like this and have it effective, the more you force or can force the defense to stay in very basic packages, pre and post snap, and that will definitely help out a young quarterback. Now, as defenses got smarter just to deal with that 2-by-2, started changing how alignments work, and you get into this is almost a formation, but not really, kind of. And I've got a little video that will show that kind of explains it visually better. But you can do stuff 2-by-2, 3-by-1, get into some pre-snaps motion, stuff like that. So let's take a look at it. So to kind of show 12 personnel and how you can interchange the pieces, and in a way, it's almost like a different formation every time you do it. Got four of them here pulled from Week 6 Tampa Bay game because Olave got hurt early in that game, and we kind of running some 11 personnel before that. I think more than 12, and it kind of flip flop just by virtue of the fact we lost one of our top receivers. But this is a standard, you know, pretty much 2-by-2 formation out of 12 personnel, wide receiver and tight end to the left, wide receiver, tight end to the right, and your running back, who's Alvin Kamara, just hanging out in his spot in the backfield. But you can also go 3-by-1, which is basically two wide receivers tight end to one side. You can even motion to it, which is an example of right here, was the F or move tight end in this particular play. So he lines up in that traditional 2-by-2, but motions up towards the top of the screen. The F, the move tight end, whatever vernacular any team wants to call him. And so now you're into 3-by-2 mode here at this point. And if you really want to get creative, you can do stuff like, well, we're still 2-by-2. However, we've decided to go to one side of the formation and split two wide receivers out wide while we stack our two tight ends on the opposite side of the formation. So you have a defense rolling out, looking at this and going, hey, they're probably in some type of run mode or particular scheme on a play. And then suddenly the two wide receivers are on one side, two tight ends on the other. It can cause problems, which is, again, you see a lot of the times that we were in 12 type personnel in that Tampa Bay game. They went a lot of just box heavy 10 in there, single high safety, zone, matchup, man to man, all that kind of stuff. And in the previous video where I showed coming from the four things that every football fan should know, and pulled some video footage of this game, it it did lead to some opportunities for us. So if used correctly, if you can get that portion of 12 personnel where you can cause confusion, either by alignment, by motion, by stacking one side of the line, maybe showing run, but being able to throw to the other side of it. It has a lot of flexibility, which is, one of the pros of it. But most of this shows you when you're looking at these four clips that the con of it tends to compress space and put a lot of defenders right in the box, right at the line of scrimmage, can kind of be a downside of it at times. We have to talk about pros versus cons basically in the use of 12 personnel, because where it does a good job, sort of the pros, it is very versatile package that you can use different formations, just like we kind of talked about, even motioning or coming out the huddle where it's unbalanced or balanced, motioning to either one if you need to or want to. And it's not the dominant, nor will it ever be, I think, the dominant personnel grouping in the NFL. That's 11. So one running back, one tight end, three receivers. But it's kind of the opposite in a way of 11. Like we said earlier, it lends itself to power runs definitely, but also inside zone, wide zone, combos, split zone, like we said, just about anything you want to do. And that moves on to if you're able to run the ball out of it, and you need to be able to run the ball out of it if you want to throw it, because it really lends itself to play action, RPOs. And if you happen to have a mobile quarterback, then you get the triple bonus of going read option as part of your run in the RPO. So read option, run, pass option, right? So think about what Kellen Moore did in Philly with Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, being able to read option, get the run component out of either way if it's there, whether Hurts keeps it or hands it off, or pull the ball and more than likely hit somebody that's wide open, because as effective as they were running the ball, it was almost impossible to defend the pass when they were effective in this formation. It and that's what can force defenses to stay very basic and not too exotic, because you can just kind of hit them at different angles with different aspects of your offense. And again, you add a triple threat when the quarterback is able to pull a ball and run. If you're going to do some type of RPO or play action that isn't there, be able to move the pocket, roll out, and tuck and run it there if he needs to. Can get you in and out of a lot of problems. And if you're fortunate enough to have, you know, a top tight end, currently Mark Andrews Travis Kelsey used to be that guy that's getting to the end, but he's still pretty damn good. George Kittle, TJ Hawkinson, fantastic. Most NFL teams don't have that. The Saints definitely do not have that, nor do I think anybody on the roster currently will ever become that. Hopefully, I'm wrong on that because I'd love to see one of those guys develop into that. So then you're looking at what a lot of NFL teams have to do out of this formation, and kind of gets into some of the con usage of it is the fact that you're going to have to use two to kind of get the production out of some of those top end guys. Now, last year, Kubiak was successful in doing that because when you look at it, Johnson and Moreau, our top two guys combined, they combined for 82 catches, 961 yards, and 8 touchdowns. That'll pretty much get you in the conversation. If you have one tight end putting up numbers like that, get them in the conversation as one of the top tight ends. Still not at the high level as some of these other guys can do. So if you don't have two, it's a big con if you try to do anything out of this. It's definitely more of an early down formation, short yardage formation, or if you're using it to convert on third or fourth down, you needs to be reasonable yardage. It's going to be really hard to do a whole lot out of this out of long yardage. Mostly because the major reason is it compresses space around the line of scrimmage. And with only two wide receivers on the field, unless you have an Andrews or a Bowers or somebody like that, you limit it to how much you can spread the field, especially vertically, trying to get a longer pass completion. As I said, I don't think we have one of those guys in our tight end room, at least not right now. So you're going to have to work scheme wise this formation to find space when you want to do that, and which means you're going to have to run the ball, which means on a 3rd and 3 or 4th and 2, fantastic. 3rd and 12 or 4th and 10 late in the game, 12 is not going to help you a whole lot. The basic breakdown is of those two tight ends that you need, and this can be a pro or a con depending on what you have in the room, because normally what you're looking at is what they call a Y or traditional or inline tight end. He's the guy that's going to line up mostly on the line or right off the line next to one of the offensive tackles. The other one, commonly F or a move tight end. We referenced that a little bit in the previous video, where he's off the ball. So he can go wide, he can motion. Sometimes he can stay wide, act more of as a big wide receiver than a tight end. Could even motion him into the backfield, and suddenly you're kind of in a 21 look because he H-back or a fullback spot. So what you get out of those two positions, if you get enough, it's a pro. If you don't get enough, it's a con. And quite frankly, I don't see any way you could actually use it. So really, I think the two main questions that we have to look at in trying to kind of figure this 12 personnel tight end situation out is what exactly is overall the NFL usage of 12 personnel. I was able to find a website where I could go back and pull the last 3 seasons worth of data and make some comparisons. And I think you see a trend developing there, and you kind of see what the Saints have done the last 3 seasons and what Kellen Moore has done the last 3 seasons in 3 different stops. Remember, Cowboys, Chargers, and Eagles. And I think there's some tipping points or key information in there that we can kind of make some educated guesses. And then from there, we've got to ask, well, what's already in the room to be able to make anything we try to do with 12 personnel actually work? So in data provided by summersports.com, there's their link. They compiled, I actually copied from them personnel tendencies per team. Now they keep track of it for the last 3 seasons, 22, 23, and 24. What I pulled was the Cowboys from 22, the Chargers from 23, and the Eagles from 24. The 3 places where Kellen Moore was offensive coordinator / play caller. And I also pulled up the corresponding years for the Saints just to kind of compare where Kellen Moore was to Pete Carmichael in 22 and 23 and Clint Kubiak in 24. And when you look at 22, the league averaged 17.89%, so roughly a little under 18%. Moore's Cowboys finished seventh in the league. The Saints were 12th in the league at 22.4, 21.2, respectively. So both of them a little over 4 percentage points over the league average. Now, one thing I added to this was the usage of 11 personnel, which around 60%, 59.75, and it was pretty consistent for each of those 3 years. So when you were looking at the league average for 12 personnel, we're going to see that it incrementally started to creep up while 11 personnel stayed basically the same. Now in 23, Moore is now with the Chargers, and his rate of usage is 23.3%, roughly where he was with Dallas. With the Saints, Carmichael, was about in the same place, 20.7%, but still both of them higher than league average. More consistently percentage wise higher at about 4%, but Pete was kind of right at league average for that. The big change, kind of in a way, happens here in 24. The Saints actually jumped the Eagles because our usage rate goes all the way up to 30%. The Eagles, Kellen Moore, 29%. So he had a significant jump too, just not quite as much as the Saints did. And, at 30.04 as opposed to 29.35, slightly over half of, zero point 0.7 of a percentage point, still relatively close. If you look at the number of snaps, it's relatively close from 1,032 to 1114. And oddly enough, Moore's 1114 plays in 24 is identical to his 1114 plays in with the Cowboys. So over that 3-season span, roughly 2 percentage points every year there was an increase, kind of trending to more 12 personnel, almost like the league is kind of catching up to what Kellen Moore was doing the previous couple of seasons. And with the Saints dipped their toes in under Carmichael and then kind of went hard all in under Clint Kubiak. Now, one thing that's interesting on this that I discovered while I was fooling with the data to get this ready was the fact that with the Cowboys, Moore's pass rate, 34, 35% roughly. Carmichael, 51%. So he was about an even split. Moore was 2-1 run over pass. Get to the Chargers, Moore popped it up to about 50% even, whereas in the Saints, increased somewhat over 50%, but still more or less 56-44. They're pretty much balanced. The Saints went the other way, and now they're pretty much 60-40 under Kubiak out of this personnel set, 12 personnel, while the Eagles went all the way down to 28%, so a couple points, four percentage points over a quarter. Goes to show you, I think, if you think about what was going on in each of those 3 seasons, Cowboys, he liked to throw the ball there, but they had a pretty good run offense, rushing game. So I think he was more inclined to run the ball out of this formation there. The Chargers, Herbert, and what was going on with the Chargers in that 1 year there, I think just a lot of game flow and game situations dictated they were pass heavy most of the time anyway, along with personnel. With the Eagles, okay, we have Jalen Hurts handing off to Saquon Barkley or pulling the ball and running it himself. Heavy running game. They were one of the best in the league at running the ball. So they didn't have to throw it much. So they didn't try to throw it much compared to everyone else. But when they did do it, it was very efficient. So I know, even though the numbers don't show this, when you're talking about that 28.44% being that low, I guarantee you out of this formation, when they did throw the ball there, they were highly effective doing it because the run component, when you're talking about Hurts and Barkley last year, you go look at what they were doing. Yeah, that was an awful lot to deal with for the defense. So overall, I think what this shows obviously is a trending more to 12 personnel and not at the expense of 11. It's at the expense of all the other personnel formations. That the league is catching on that 12's a personnel is a pretty good package to have in your back pocket. And you need some good tight ends to be able to do it. Borne out by the fact, let's just look at two teams in the last couple of years, the Raiders. They drafted Mayer out of Notre Dame. The following year, they drafted Brock Bowers. A lot of people thought Mayer was on his way out. He was going to get traded. In fact, that rumor resurfaced again a few weeks ago. So far, nothing's happening there. I think the Raiders are thinking, we're going to be going more 12 personnel. Pittsburgh, sitting on Pat Freiermuth, pretty good tight end in and of himself, just traded for Jonnu Smith, another very good tight end from Miami. So now they're both paired over there in Pittsburgh. Again, I'm thinking more and more teams are seeing that trend in the benefit of using 12 personnel, never as heavy as you want to use 11, but it's a tool you really should have in your toolbox. So let's look, if we're going to be anywhere near those numbers, and I think we will be in 12 personnel usage, well, what do we have to be able to use? Now, top three, Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, and Jack Stoll. Let's say this about Foster Moreau right now and get this out the way, provided he's healthy, he's dealing with some injuries. Look like OTAs, the feeling kind of was he'll be ready to go camp, early camp, and expected to be ready for the season. That was not 100% confirmed by any stretch of the imagination. We'll likely know more once camp starts in July 23rd. So for right now, I'm going to leave him in the conversation until we're explicitly told we need to take him out. But when you look at Juwan Johnson, he's a little more the pass catching guy. And he's probably our most likely option as the big pass catcher, bigger bodied, make some of those tougher catches, contested catches. I think we're gonna have to rely on him because we didn't draft one, we didn't sign one, and right now it doesn't seem like we're really going to add to the receiver room. But it's okay if we can get enough out of Juwan Johnson to handle that role. Moreau, likely the inline guy. But the thing is about both of them, last year, if you want to go back and pull video from Kubiak, more or less how he used them, but he did swap those roles, and they were able to handle it. Because when I look at both those guys, I think they're solid NFL tight ends, kind of for different reasons. Moreau, I think I always call him, he's a pro's pro tight end. He's a good leader. He does every aspect you need a tight end to do. He's solid, above average, pretty good. Somewhere falls in that range almost every time you put him out on the field. Need a guy like that. He's a steady rock. I think Juwan Johnson's solid in a different way because I think there's more peaks and valleys with Juwan, where we see him um, really, really just show up in a game, make some big catches. It's a pretty good red zone target for us when we're actually able to utilize a good red zone offense. But at other times, I don't want to disparage because I don't necessarily mean it's all on him. It could be some of the way our offensive coordinators last few seasons handled him, but at times kind of disappear from the game. And occasionally he does have a I don't know, maybe a drop issue. I don't know if we can say that, but sometimes my personal opinion, like when the ball's going to him, it's like, and then some games I don't worry about it because he's already made a couple big catches, and you're like, no, we've got the better version of him here for this game. I'm trying to be fair in that assessment. But like I said, it's more of a feeling on me, and it just might be my feeling, and I'm being unfair, and my apologies if I am. Third one, Jack Stoll. We pulled him straight off Philly, where he was their third tight end, primarily their blocking tight end, and you pull some footage from him. He loves to not hit people. He loves to collide into people and cause hurt. Awesome. He wasn't used much in the passing game. I think he had 2 catches for 10 yards. I remember seeing one highlight of a little check down he took and made a pretty nice catch and run. But it seemed in OTAs, some footage and the way they were talking about him, Kellen Moore does want to try to use him a little more in the passing game, which would be great. So you get another guy that probably is going to be in line, mostly handling blocking. But if you can use him in some type of move capacity, the more diverse you get with those 3 guys, the better this whole system can work. And I expect Moore to be creative in using all three. I think he kind of has to. What is paramount important, and this is kind of a con with using a lot of 12 personnel, you're going to have probably four roster spots in your 53 man holding on the tight ends. Now, if you're not carrying a fullback, not a big deal at all. But depending on how you're going to construct your roster, what's going on, this goes back to Moreau. What if Moreau's not ready to go to week 2 or 3? So you really can't IR him or pup him in the initial 53. You might have to make some roster maneuvers there. It can get complicated. And if you don't have him at all, what I'm about ready to say, instead of one, you need two. But what you need is right now, assuming Moreau is going to be ready to go, you're going to need at least one more tight end to step up major league so you can comfortably put him on the 53 and be able to use him and rely on him. So you're looking at a tight end room: Dallin Holker, Michael Jacobson, our rookie draft pick, Maliki Mataval, Trayton Welch, Seth Green. This is 5 guys fighting, in my mind, hugely important for at least one job, possibly 2. And some of those guys are going to have to develop enough because we're going to need to keep a couple on the practice squad. Like Jacobson spent most of his time last year on our practice squad. He's one I'm looking at going, can we get him to step up? Can Hoker become, it's kind of hyped. He was an undrafted free agent. A lot of people, and Doug Barone, our tight end coach last year, championed his cause greatly. He was a rookie. We didn't see a lot out of him. Maybe he makes the big leap in 2. Maybe he becomes a version of Foster Moreau in training, so to speak. Don't know, but I do know one of them has to. And if none of them can, then we're going to have to go find a tight end to add to the group. And free agency look out there, I don't really know that you're going to get something any more reliable than what you already have, so that you're hoping one of these young guys makes the jump. And like I said, if you got issues with Moreau's health, you need 2 of them to do it. Now, one name, didn't mention yet, saving it for last. Did a video on how he could be the X factor. I'll slap it up here somewhere at the top, put a link on it if you want to go back and watch it. But Taysom Hill, devastating knee injury late last year, was pumped. And why I did the video was he actually showed up at OTAs. Now, he couldn't really participate, but he was being a team leader. He was out there. It was acknowledged he's participating in like the classroom portion of it that Kellen Moore mentioned. Normally, I would be, look, it's going to be a while before he's back. We'll be lucky to have him, starting off on some type of probably pup list in training camp. We'll be lucky to have him somewhere around midseason or after at best, if he's able to come back at all. However, Taysom Hill is Taysom Hill, and over the years, he's just beat expectations when he's been injured and when to come back. They'll tell you 2 weeks, he shows up the next week. I mean, that's just who he's been. At age 35 and a bad knee injury, I'm not saying he can do it. All I'm saying is if he does do it, it would not surprise me in the least. Or at least coming back early enough where you may consider sneaking him on the 53 man once you get past, because if you do it in the preseason, they're done for the year. But if you could sneak somebody on the 53, then IR him right after, he becomes eligible for return after the first 4 weeks. So you add him into this mix. Now, all of a sudden, 12 personnel is looking like, holy crap, we may need to run an awful lot of it. It's a total X factor because he can do so much. And using him as a move tight end, that F tight end, he is a wide receiver. He can be a running back. He can play tight end. He has no qualms about sticking his nose in somewhere and trying to block. And kind of like Stoll, he wants to collide into people and hurt them when he does. So I don't know where that's going to go. And I'm not making a prediction. I'm just saying, open to the possibility that one last time we get lucky and we have some version of Taysom Hill ready to go earlier than expected and hoped for. Flip side of that is we're not going to know anything till training camp, and there is some talk out there that does he even make this team? It would devastate me if he doesn't, but I would understand why the Saints may have to go down that move. So my video originally was on X factor on if you can get him on the field, but right now he's a total X X factor, easy for me to say, on making the roster and what that's going to entail. And he is one of the biggest stories when it comes to the tight end group that we ought to find something out July 23rd when training camp opens. If he's there, what's he doing? And I'm pretty sure the first time Kellen Moore goes out for a press conference, he's going to be asked an awful lot about. Conclusion I'm drawing about our tight end room, if you go back and think about it, there are teams that have great success with 12 personnel, especially since it's become a little more prevalent as we looked at over recent seasons, recent years. And I think that's why you seeing the rising trend in this usage is there's a lot of benefits to it if you can design it and have the players to be able to make it work, as we discussed pretty much the whole video. But you look at some teams like Philly, Baltimore, Kansas City, San Francisco, Detroit, and you start reading articles or pulling up YouTube videos about 12 personnel, how they're used, play calling, a lot of which I've been watching recently to get prepared for this video or reading in the case of articles. Kellen Moore's name appears when you start talking about coaches who can use it effectively. Same breath as like, Andy Reid or Kyle Shanahan. So Ben Johnson, when he was with Detroit, used it like a surgical dagger to carve defenses up, both running and throwing the ball. So I think it's a very strong grouping for what the Saints are going to be bringing to the table, provided again, health is good and we get somebody of that young group, at least one, possibly two, up to speed, ready to go and be able to get on the field and produce and contribute. You're talking about the offensive groups in the rooms on the offensive side. Obviously, quarterback is always going to be the most important group. Unfortunately, for right now, that's not one we can lean on. So I think the most important group that we can lean on for any type of success, however that's going to look in 2025, is obviously the offensive line. We talked about that, but I'm of the opinion, considering who our head coach is, what he's done in the past with this, and while we don't have one of those top 5 all-pro type tight ends, we have some good guys in that room. That the combination of the personnel grouping with a good scheme, good play calling, and what we have available, this may be the second most important group right now until we get quarterback straightened out, however long that takes. The second most important group on that offense. So I think it's very critical to our success, whether it's actually winning games or if you want to measure success by making sure we find our quarterback of the future out of this young group. You go 30% roughly, a third of your personnel groupings out of 12. It's going to be critical that it works if you try that. So let me know what you think down in the comments about it. I've often last season gotten into this thing with our tight ends when people always telling me that they suck, and I'm like, yeah, compared to the top end guys, most NFL tight ends do, but I think you have a serviceable group that you can do good things with. And I think the fact that, you had 2 tight ends combined for almost 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, I believe, whatever it was. Hey, it's not all bad, but the offensive coordinator can't get this and play calling also can't get this to work right. Then yeah, it's not really going to help. First time here, please go ahead, hit the subscribe, hit the like, hit the share, all the fun stuff. You know me, we have to appease the algorithm. Been doing a great job of it. And I've been having a lot of fun shooting a lot of these videos, and glad you guys and gals seem to be getting some enjoyment out of it too. So try to keep working hard and keep bringing that to you. So till I see you next time, I'm Tim. Peace out and who dat.